The plan worked. My husband, Ryder, exclaimed, his arms sweeping dramatically around my late father's house. It might be old, but it's spacious and in a great location. From now on, my parents and I will live here, he declared with an infuriating grin. My chest tightened. How had I ever loved someone so selfish? Ryder's smugness only grew as he continued his tirade. This house of your father's is mine now. Get out, he demanded, his voice dripping with arrogance. As movers brought in his parents' belongings, I realized something that made me laugh despite the pain. Ryder had no idea what was really going on. My name is Maeve Honeywell. My father and I had shared this home since my mother passed away during my high school years. He raised me with unwavering love and kindness, and our bond was unshakable. When my father's health started to decline, I suggested to Ryder that we move in to support him. At first, Ryder seemed enthusiastic. Are you sure about this? My father asked hesitantly, his smile warm yet uncertain. He didn't want to be a burden, but my insistence, and Ryder's apparent agreement, eventually reassured him. The move felt right. It gave me a chance to be close to my father, and it seemed to work for Ryder too. My father, ever generous, even said, "This is what I've always wanted," as he brewed us coffee to welcome us into the home I'd grown up in. Ryder soon floated an idea: you could quit your job and focus on taking care of your father full-time. At first, I hesitated. The thought of giving up my financial independence worried me, but Ryder's words seemed so supportive. "Don't stress about the money," he reassured me, "I'll take care of everything." Eventually, I decided to take the leap. My father was hesitant, but when I explained my desire to dedicate myself to him, he reluctantly agreed. For a while, life seemed harmonious. But Ryder began to change. He grew irritable, snapping at small things like the volume of the TV. "Can you keep it down? I'm eating," he barked one evening, shocking me. When my father was around, Ryder acted normal, but his patience with me was wearing thin. His late nights became more frequent. Once, I found out through an impersonal email that he was on a business trip. Later, I learned he had been staying at his parents' home during these absences. Then came a call from my mother-in-law. She berated me, claiming I'd forced Ryder to shoulder all the responsibilities while I lazed around. I realized then that Ryder had spun a web of lies. He wasn't the supportive partner he'd pretended to be, he was a manipulative liar. The cracks in our relationship deepened. Ryder stopped contributing financially, ignoring my messages about household expenses. My love for him dissolved, replaced by frustration and disappointment. Divorce loomed in my mind, but I chose to wait, not wanting to worry my father. Everything changed the day my father collapsed. At the hospital, the doctor's words crushed me. There wasn't much time left. I stayed by my father's side, forcing smiles through my tears, assuring him he would get better. One evening, as I returned home to grab some belongings, the weight of our empty house hit me. I collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. Then Ryder texted me. His message was as cold as ever. "Since we're living apart, handle your own expenses. Maybe you can use your father's pension." Anger surged through me. I hurled my phone across the room, its clatter echoing in the silence. My feelings for Ryder were gone, burned away by his cruelty. As I prepared to return to the hospital, a letter arrived in the mail. I opened it and froze. The contents were unexpected, and for the first time in weeks, a glimmer of hope pierced through my sorrow. Tucking the documents away, I headed back to my father, determined to face whatever came next with newfound strength. My father's condition deteriorated rapidly, and I knew his time was running out. I spent his final days at the hospital, returning home each night in tears. He passed peacefully, and I was by his side in those last moments. The grief was suffocating, but his memory stayed with me, deeply etched in my heart. With help from family, the funeral arrangements were taken care of. Though Ryder and his family didn't attend, I hadn't informed them directly, so it wasn't a surprise. However, a few days after we'd settled the estate, Ryder appeared at the door with bags in hand. "It's been a while. I heard your father passed," he said nonchalantly. Seeing his face filled me with rage, but I forced myself to remain calm. "What do you want? Why the luggage?" I asked, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside. "Isn't that a bit harsh, coming from a wife welcoming her husband home?" He smirked. "Oh, and the luggage? It's my parents' stuff, of course." Hearing him call himself my husband infuriated me. He had abandoned me, stopped supporting us financially, and now he was acting like nothing had changed. His words made no sense. Were you waiting for me to be jobless, struggling alone with the bills, all while caring for your dying father? I asked, unable to keep the sarcasm out of my voice. Is that what makes you so pleased with yourself? Ryder sneered. It seems like I'm the one who got stuck with your plan, he said, his words dripping with sarcasm. His mention of a plan caught my attention. What do you mean? I asked, curiosity laced with suspicion. He grinned, the truth spilling from his lips in a way I couldn't have expected. Living with an old man was never my idea, but I knew if I asked for a divorce, I wouldn't get this house. So, I played the perfect husband, made you dependent, and got you to stay with your father. That way, the house would be mine, he said matter-of-factly. I stood there, stunned, my disbelief growing. That doesn't make sense, I snapped. You left and stopped paying the bills. Ryder rubbed his head in frustration. Yeah, I lost my patience, but I never thought you'd actually ask for a divorce. His smug smile made me question how I ever loved him. I could barely stand to hear him anymore. The plan worked, he said, unaffected by the tension. This house may be old, but it's spacious and well located. From now on, my parents and I will be living here. Could anyone be more selfish? I felt a wave of disgust. As he continued spouting insults, I stood there, in shock, but also with an unexpected sense of clarity. This house is mine, I said, my voice cool. You should have known that by now. Ryder froze, disbelief flashing across his face. You're kidding, right? He said, clearly not expecting this turn of events. No, I replied, my lips curling into a smile. This is my house, it never was yours. Ryder immediately grabbed his phone and called someone, likely his mother. What? Mom, Maeve is saying something strange. We're not divorced, are we? I overheard him ask, panic creeping into his voice. His frantic tone made it clear he hadn't seen this coming. After he hung up, his confusion deepened. Did you really file for divorce? He asked, still struggling to grasp the situation. Yes, I replied calmly, savoring the moment. The day my father went to the hospital, your mother sent me the completed form. I submitted it without hesitation. She sure has a way of handling things, doesn't she? Damn it, Ryder muttered under his breath. That wasn't supposed to happen. It was just a backup, not for real. Well, you filled it out, didn't you? I said, intentions aside. I took care of the divorce, just as you wanted. You should be thanking me. Ryder's face went pale as reality settled in. So, who gets the house? He asked, his voice faltering. I shook my head, unimpressed. Since we barely lived together and my father still held the assets at the time of the divorce, there's nothing to divide. As for the savings, you've got no claim to it. He sputtered, trying to argue, but his words lost power as I stood firm. Let's wrap this up, I said. If you continue bringing your stuff here without permission, I'll have to call the police. Ryder's face twisted in frustration, but he had no choice but to pack up and leave. Once he was gone, I sprinkled salt by the entrance, offering a prayer in front of my parents' portraits. This is for the best, I whispered. I'll grow stronger now, please watch over me. The thought of my parents reunited in heaven brought me a strange sense of peace. With renewed resolve, I set out to find a job. Thanks to a friend's recommendation, I quickly landed a role that suited my skills as an illustrator for a cartoon editorial. A few days later, Ryder sent me a message. Sorry for being stubborn, I wanted to start over, which is why I came to the house. I found it absurd and almost considered responding, but instead, I ignored him. Ryder, however, didn't stop. His messages grew more poetic, like a persistent suitor trying to win back my affection. I would show my coworkers the melodramatic messages, laughing at how absurd they were. Look, the melodramatic stalker's back, I joked. Despite the amusement, his persistence made me uncomfortable, so I ignored him even more. Then, one day, the doorbell rang. I peeked through the peephole and saw Ryder standing there, surprised he'd come in person. I immediately called the police. I know you're in there. I see your car. Please, just listen. I'm really in trouble, he pleaded. My parents sold their house, thinking we'd move in here. I have nowhere else to go. Please help me. I felt no sympathy. Their assumption that this house was theirs revealed their sense of entitlement. The police arrived and convinced Ryder to leave, though he resisted until they escorted him away. After I ignored his emails, my in-laws began reaching out, first with calls, then with emails. When I didn't respond, "How can you ignore us? You're not struggling. You must have inherited the house from your father. Please, we need somewhere to stay. Help us out. We've quit our jobs. We can't survive like this." I blocked them, but they didn't stop. They showed up at my door, loud and persistent. "Come out. How can you just ignore us? We were family once. You're being cruel." Without hesitation, I called the police again. This time, there was silence on the other side of the door. When I peeked through the peephole, I saw an unfamiliar man confronting my former in-laws. "Go home," he said, his voice sharp and commanding. They were taken aback. "What did you say? Who are you? Are you her new lover?" they shot back. The man was unfazed. "Your behavior is the problem. People are gathering because of you. You're disturbing the neighborhood," he said coldly. The presence of this stranger made my former in-laws back off, finally realizing their overbearing attitude wouldn't be tolerated anymore. As the neighbors began to gather, I felt a mix of embarrassment and satisfaction. Watching my ex-in-laws flustered under the scrutiny of the crowd was oddly rewarding. When the police arrived, one officer took one look at them and said, "It's you guys again." Their faces turned beet red with embarrassment. "How much more trouble do you plan on causing? Get a grip," the officer added sternly. After the situation was diffused, I thanked the officer as he left, feeling a wave of relief as I watched my ex-in-laws being escorted away. The neighbors began to disperse, and the street grew quiet again. A few hours later, my doorbell rang. Cautiously, I looked through the peephole and saw the same man who had confronted my in-laws earlier. His expression was friendly, so I opened the door hesitantly. With a warm smile, he said, "It's been a while. You should have told me you were back." I stared at him, puzzled, until he added, "Don't tell me you've forgotten. It's been over 10 years. Remember me? I'm Frank." Hearing his name triggered a flood of memories. "Frankie, of course," I exclaimed, my face breaking into a smile. It was Frank, my childhood friend from next door. We hadn't seen each other since we both changed schools. Finally remembered. "Huh," Frank laughed. "I moved back here recently, so we're neighbors again. It's been too long." We spent the next few moments catching up, reminiscing about our childhoods and the antics we got into. I shared some of my recent struggles, and he listened attentively. When I mentioned my father's passing, Frank offered his condolences and even asked if he could pay his respects, recalling the kindness my father had shown him as a child. Having someone from my past share this moment with me brought an unexpected sense of comfort. The fake lawsuit. A few days later, an unexpected letter arrived from a law firm. My heart sank as I read through it. It accused me of infidelity and demanded I pay damages. Moments later, I received an email from an unfamiliar address with the subject line, regarding the notification. The message read, "Your ex-husband Ryder has filed a lawsuit for marital infidelity. Admitting to your actions now will avoid unnecessary escalation. We plan to notify your workplace. To protect your future, we recommend resolving this issue promptly." It reeked of desperation and manipulation. Suspecting the letter was fake, I consulted a real lawyer, who confirmed my suspicions. Deciding to play along, I replied, "I'm willing to consider your claims, but I'll need proof of this alleged infidelity." Their response was emotional rather than professional. "Ryder endured immense emotional distress, and we seek compensation for that." Still, they provided no evidence. "It's hard to believe a professional would act on such unfounded claims," I replied coolly. "Impersonating a lawyer is illegal, you know." Just to confirm, "Do you hold legitimate qualifications?" That was the last I heard from them, until another email arrived days later. "I'm a professional, but your arguments were unbeatable. We're withdrawing the lawsuit." I couldn't resist responding. "There's no need to withdraw. I'm calm about being falsely accused and look forward to meeting this passionate lawyer in court." All communication ceased after that. The final showdown. Silence didn't last long. Late one night, my former in-laws showed up at my door, loudly begging for forgiveness. "We made a mistake, please spare us from the lawsuit." Their shouting woke me from a deep sleep, and my anger boiled over. "Stop disturbing me," I shouted as I grabbed my father's old wooden sword from the corner. They froze, terrified by my sudden outburst. "Come any closer, and I won't overlook it," I warned, glaring at them. my former mother-in-law whispered. "We're so sorry," while Ryder cowered behind her. "If you were truly sorry, you'd have changed your ways. Don't ever show up here again," I said sternly. Just then, the flashing lights of a police car appeared, and I realized a neighbor had called them. The officers arrived promptly and escorted my former in-laws away. In a desperate attempt to save face, my former mother-in-law exclaimed. She tried to attack us with a wooden sword. The officers dismissed her claim after I calmly explained that I had only grabbed it for self-defense. Frank, who had been nearby, testified to their repeated harassment, and the police concluded their actions were malicious. Frank later joked, "Your voice was terrifying that night." Following his advice, I filed an official report. With his testimony, the process went smoothly, and a restraining order was issued. Finally, peace was restored. A new beginning. The incident became the talk of the neighborhood when someone's recording of the late-night commotion surfaced online. My former in-laws became the subject of ridicule, and they faded from my life for good. As for Frank and me, we grew closer over the following months. His kindness and unwavering support reminded me of the joy we'd shared as kids. One day, he confessed his feelings, and we began dating. Frank brings light and laughter into my life, and the time we spend together is genuinely joyful. It feels like a gift from my father, a blessing from above, giving me hope for the future.